This weekend's gospel is the continuation of last weekend. If you remember last weekend's gospel, Jesus summoned the 12 and sent them forth. And he entrusted them with the mission to go and proclaim the message of the gospel, to heal, and to prepare the way for those towns in which he was going to go and preach later on. And then in today's gospel, they come back and reported everything that took place. Everything they saw, everything they did, everything they taught. And the gospel puts it in very simple words. But let us think about the power of that moment as they come back to Jesus and share with Jesus and with each other the way in which God was present, the way in which they saw the Spirit of God active and alive in their midst, and the way in which, by their words and their actions, they also became channels of God's Spirit to give life, to restore, to transform, to touch the lives of the people, of the children of God. I spent 9 years in seminary, but the greatest lessons of Christian life I've learned not in the classroom, but in the interaction of faith and life with the church, with the people of God, with the people in the communities where I have been honored to serve as a priest. And it is in the reporting of God's life and God's Spirit in the life of people where the greatest treasures of our faith are, not in the theological thinking and the theological treatises that are wonderful and very valuable, but it is in the daily life, and as people share their daily life of the experience of God, there lies the great treasure of the most beautiful lessons I've learned as a Christian and as a priest. I learned how to pray the Our Father since I was a little boy, but I really never knew how to pray the Our Father until a few years ago when I went to a nursing home and met a man named John. John had been in the nursing home for several years at that time. He was bedridden. And the joy in John's face every time I showed up with communion was out of this world. His face changed, his demeanor changed, and the joy he experienced and the joy he transmitted filled the whole room. And when the moment came every time to pray the Our Father, John said those words of the prayer that we all know and we pray all the time so easily. He said them with such a great faith, with such a great love, that he taught me how to pray the Our Father. And I learned, after being priest for many years and a Christian for my whole life, I learned from John's testimony how to pray. It was beautiful. John has now passed away, and I'm sure that from heaven, in heaven, he rejoices, seeing and enjoying the presence of the God he knew saves. Who saved him during his illness and who saved him in the new life. In many interactions with friends and parishioners, I have seen how God is beautifully present through their testimony of life. Just this year, at the celebration of the Divine Mercy Sunday, a good friend gave a testimony of how she has encountered the mercy of God present and alive in her own life, in her own family, in times of great need, in times in which the world around her seemed to fall apart. But through this great devotion to divine mercy, she encountered the light and the strength that she needed, and she offered a beautiful witness to this beautiful life of God in her own life. And there I encountered a great and deep treasure of God's mercy and God's love present and available for everyone, but especially for those who are in a time of great need and great anguish. This morning at St. Rose of Lima, where I am a pastor, we welcomed our Youth Service League. You have here at St. Pat's Youth in Action, and so we also had some kids going to participate of Service Week, a summer service trip. In our group, we had one going to Delaware with Catholic Hard Work Camp, and another one went to Maine with Habitat for Humanity. And one of the girls who participated in the trip to Delaware came today to report on the experience, and what she reported was amazing. She talked about how in her young life, at her young age, she is a high schooler, probably a sophomore in high school, how she has experienced doubt in her own faith, how she has had some times in her life in which faith has been difficult and holding on to God has been challenging. And as she went on this service trip, as she had a time of prayer, special prayer in adoration, something changed. She was touched in a deep and profound way at that time of prayer. From that moment on, she said this morning she wasn't the same. And after that experience of adoration, she will go to the chapel every morning to pray the rosary and to spend some time in prayer. And in prayer, she was able to contemplate the love that her family has for her, the love of her grandmother who taught her how to pray the rosary long time ago. But it was there in that experience that she came to the realization of the beautiful treasure that she had in her family, her grandmother. And she was sharing this with the whole community. And there we all saw that beautiful and wonderful presence of God that is active and alive. Like these examples, I could spend the whole evening sharing stories on how many people I have encountered in my ministry and in my life, how they have shared the good news of the gospel. That's exactly what the apostles did as they went, sent forth by Jesus, but also as they returned, they shared the joy of the gospel with each other, and they shared how God was present, alive in their midst, in them, through them, and around them. And when we think of our baptismal call to go forth and preach the good news of salvation, that is exactly what we're called to do. It's not about theological degrees or theological treatises or a deep understanding of dogma. It is about sharing how we are attentive to God being present, alive, and active in our midst. It is about sharing those life-saving graces that God gives us here and there. It is about working to open our hearts, to enhance our hearts, to recognize that divine presence of the Lord that is beautifully present in that which is simple and ordinary. It is about sharing the joy of the gospel with those around us. So let us be encouraged today to do that. And as we do that and try to be intentional about recognizing God's presence with us and our call to share the good news of the gospel, let us also be mindful that sharing the good news of the gospel is not about doing tasks after tasks after tasks. It's not about projects that we can do in our faith and develop in our faith. They are important, and like in parish life, every parish has projects and different ways for us to participate, but it goes beyond that. The Lord recognizes the apostles are tired, and He invites them to go and rest and find rest with Him and in Him. And this brings to mind those words that Jesus mentions also in the gospel: "Come to me, all you who are labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest." And so that in our time, in our lives, as we proclaim the gospel and share the joy of the gospel, we focus on sharing the life experience, not just doing things, but sharing the experience of God in our own lives. And when we do get tired, let us come to Jesus and bring to Him our burdens, our labors, and everything that brings concerns or is challenging in our lives and hearts. Let us go to Him to find rest in Him. Certainly, in our lives, we hear many different voices and many different invitations to go to different places when we find life difficult and challenging, and when we are tired from the labors of the day and of life. But let us go to Jesus. Let us go to the Lord and find in Him the rest that He offers as the Good Shepherd. The Eucharist, for instance, it's one of those places where we can find rest. But the Eucharist is certainly just the foundational place of that rest, so that we may rest in the Lord today and be charged to go out and continue sharing the joy of the gospel with others. But during the week, we also need to find moments to spend our time with Jesus and to find our rest in Him. So I'd like to encourage you to be intentional about your prayer life in the coming days, from here until next time you participate of the Eucharist. Because in our prayer life, we find the rest that we need and the energy and the strength that we need to continue proclaiming the good news of salvation and sharing the good news of salvation. Finding rest in the Lord will help us to share those good news as the Lord does in the gospel, and as He does in the many wonderful manifestations in our own lives and the lives of those around us. So let us ask the Lord today to give us the great strength and the grace to share the joy of the gospel with our lives, through our lives, that we may be channels of the Lord to make His divine presence and mercy available to others, and at the same time we are open our hearts and minds to recognize that presence from the experience of others who witness the message and the joy of the Lord to us.